So on today's episode of the 2X E-Commerce Podcast Show, I interview Chase Dimond. If you don't know Chase Dimond, he's an elite email marketing expert who's generated over $50 million in revenue for the e-commerce brands his agency actually runs. So it's a great episode you don't want to miss, so do stay tuned. Hello everybody, welcome to the 2X E-Commerce Podcast Show. I'm Kunle Campbell, the host, and on this episode, you're about to listen to our interview Chase Dimond, who is an email e-commerce marketing expert that solely works on the Klaviyo platform. Now, we talk a ton in this episode. I don't think I've gone as in depth as I have in any episode about email marketing for e-commerce as I have with Chase on this episode. We really tear down, benchmarks in terms of, what percentage of your revenue should be coming from email. We talk about the three kinds of emails you should be sending: flow emails, campaign emails, and transactional emails. We really go deep into them. We talk about segmentation. We talk about RFM. It's an in-depth episode. Now, if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. There's a subscribe button below this video. Smash the like button. Let us know in the comments if you have any more questions for Chase to answer. He would be happy to jump into the comments to answer them. Besides that, it's an incredible episode, in depth. He's so open with the amount of information he's about to share. Just enjoy. I'd like to give a shout out to our three sponsors: Klaviyo, Famous, and Rewind. They're amazing platforms, all three of them I believe in. But besides that, enjoy this episode with Chase Dimond. Welcome, 2Xers. Welcome to the 2X E-Commerce Podcast Show, and I'm your host, Kunle Campbell. And this is the podcast dedicated to rapid growth in online retail. So if you are, looking to grow metrics such as conversions, average order value, repeat customers, traffic, and ultimately sales, do you know what I do? I handpick the guests that come onto the show to just share their expertise and experience. And my criteria to them, or my remit to them, is one thing: can they actually help you grow those metrics I talked about? And if they can, I try my best to bring them to the show. Now, speaking of which, I have with me today Chase Dimond. Now, Chase is someone who I've been following for the past 1 year, and I've seen him grow, from the sidelines. I followed him on Twitter. I think we're Facebook friends, we're LinkedIn contacts, and the amount of value he puts out there from an email perspective, from email in e-commerce, is astounding. He's a giant. He's a big giant. He's a big player in the e-commerce space. He's a partner at Structured with Nick Shackelford. He's a top e-commerce marketing agency, and since about 2018, he's helped clients generate over $50 million in revenue attributable to email. He has spoken at IBEX, I think, or he's had clients such as the Chive, Original Grain, and CrossNet. Remember, CrossNet was on the show at the start of the lockdown. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Chase. Welcome, Chase.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you?
I am very, very, very well. I'm keeping well. It's winter here. We relish the sunshine, whenever it comes, whenever it decides to come. All right. Okay. So, I haven't done you sufficient justice. Could you take a minute or two to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to give you kind of a quick backstory of how I got to here. It'll take 1 or 2 minutes. Okay. So I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, and Crohn's disease, for people that don't know, is inflammation of your digestive tract. And this was when I was 13 years old. And from 13 to 14 years old, I was sick for the entire year due to lack of awareness of this disease. So as a 14-year-old, I made it my mission to educate other people that had symptoms that maybe had Crohn's or ulcerative colitis about this disease, so that way they could get treatment and help sooner. So from 14 to 16, I really dedicated my life to this. And, in hindsight, essentially what I was doing was guerrilla marketing. I was phone calling friends. I was taking ads out in the paper. I was throwing events. I was asking friends to bring other friends to these walks. So over the course of a few years, we were able to raise tens of thousands of dollars. And through that, we were able to impact thousands of people's lives. And I actually became the youngest board member of the Crohn's and Colitis Foundation. Wow. And it's a charity that does about $50 million a year in fundraising, specifically for IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease. So through those experiences, I got to, meet and work and kind of coexist with, leaders of banks and huge pharma companies and whatnot. So these people, again, I didn't know what I was doing at the time, essentially became my mentors, right? In hindsight, it's easy to say I was doing guerrilla marketing and growth hacking and had mentors, but at the time, I was just living my life and trying to better myself and others. So from there into college, I had to help pay for my college tuition. So I was working endless jobs and internships, accumulating skills, figuring out what I didn't like, figuring out what I liked. And that's how I got into marketing. I was working at a company kind of was a generalist, and then they started needing help on, SEO and email and all these things. And I figured like, oh, SEO is cool, but it's not really me. Or paid ads are cool, but it's not really me. And that's really where I found the love of email. And what I really love about email is the fact that it's one-to-one, but it's one-to-many. And what I mean by that is, so say, for example, you're on Facebook and you see an ad. Typically, you'll have your friend's post, your wife's post, your husband's post. You'll have all these distractions on your screen. Whereas with email, I'm going to hit a list of 5,000, 10,000, even sometimes hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And it's really just me and you in the inbox. If I can get you to open through the subject line, through the preview text, through where I land, I have your attention, and I can have your attention for 2 seconds. I can have your attention for a minute. It really is up to me on how good the content is within the email. And that's what I've always loved about it. It's really an intimate experience. You don't have to see what other people said about it. You don't have to think about other people and whatnot. So long story short, I started doing email marketing specifically on the cold email side, where I was sending high volume outbound cold emails to build communities and newsletters and audiences. And I was doing that for a couple of years, scraping these platforms and scraping that. And, a lot of the stuff was in the gray. And Nick Shackelford, who's been a good buddy of mine and, now my business partner, he was like, dude, the stuff that you're doing is so cool, but you might end up on the wrong side of some of these laws in the future. And this was before GDPR and California privacy and all this. Why don't you come join me in e-commerce? So I've been doing the e-commerce email side now for about 3.5 years. So really long-winded. That's kind of how I got to where I'm doing today. And today on our email team, we have about 30 people at our agency, and we work with and service over 50 clients. Typically, brands do between 7 and 9 figures in revenue.
There's so much to unpick, there from your journey from Crohn's disease, which I empathize, with you in terms. So do you live with it now, or does it ever go?
Yeah, so it's something that I'll have for the rest of my life, unless there happens to be a cure. So for me, I have to treat it through diet, through exercise, through keeping stress down. And I also have to get like an injection every other week, it's basically a shot every other week. And then I have to take medicine daily. So it is something that I do deal with, day in and day out. But fortunately, knock on wood, I've been pretty lucky. A lot of other people have it worse. And if I knew that, right? Like there's so few people that are so lucky to have it the way that I do, but I really had to take it on myself to help those that aren't as fortunate.
Yeah. And so I guess you don't take gluten.
So I do have some gluten in my diet, but I try to minimize it when possible. It's just hard sometimes to get away from certain types of bread. It kills me.
Yeah. Makes sense. And so taking your experience and, wanting to improve the entire cause really drove you into marketing, which is fascinating in itself. And that core is really important a lot of the time. So fast forward today with e-commerce at Structure, there's a question I really want to ask you, which is, you talked about 30 people dedicated to email marketing. On average, with individual account managers, how many accounts can an individual manage before they just hits a ceiling more or less from a productivity standpoint, because there's so many moving parts in email if you really want to do it well?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the way that we structure our team is this. So every single client will get 5 people on their team. One person will be an email marketer strategist, right? Really there to move the business forward, to focus on, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? What does the data tell us, et cetera. So that's one person. And then I'll talk about each of these roles and how many clients they can service after. So that's one person. Then we have an email designer, right? So their whole job is to make the visual and the creative of the emails. We then have an email copywriter, right? All the written words that they're responsible for, whether it's the subject line, the campaign content, the flow content. And I know we'll talk about those a bit later. We have an account manager. So obviously someone that's taking call notes, that's doing the reporting, that's keeping the team on track. And then the fifth one, and this is something we have in most cases, not all, is an email developer, someone that's actually custom coding the email. So that way it renders properly across all devices. So dependent on the role, really depends on how much a person can take on. So account managers can take on the most number of clients because they're not necessarily actually implementing the work. They're more preparing the infrastructure and preparing the setup than they are the actual execution. So I'd say our account managers could work with about 15 to 20 clients. That's being on calls all the day. That's being in a project management system. That's taking notes, et cetera. So they can work with about 15 to 20 is kind of what we've seen. The email marketer and strategist can work with about 6 to 7, maybe 8, depending on how taxing each client is or isn't. The email designer can probably work with, again, depending on the output, maybe 6 to 8 or 8 to 10 clients. And then the email copywriter could probably work with about 8 to 10 clients as well. So the email strategist and marketer can work with the least because they're doing a lot of different things that are kind of moving different pieces and parts. But the way that we built it is almost like an assembly line. So people are so focused on their specific subset that they kind of can just crank things out and be really efficient.
Division of labor. Fascinating stuff, mate. It's fascinating. Okay. And you work exclusively with Klaviyo. Why? They sponsor the show. Not just that, almost every client I work with works on Klaviyo. So why Klaviyo from your perspective? Why not be, I've come across some other agencies that are, what do you call it again? They say they're platform
agnostic.
Yeah, agnostic, exactly.
Yeah. So it's a couple things. Well, and it wasn't always this case. So when I first started, you have to take whatever you can get, right? In the beginning stages, you don't have the luxury of picking and choosing. So in the beginning stages, we were using MailChimp, Klaviyo, Bronto, ActiveCampaign, OmniSend, like you name it. If a client wanted to pay us money, we would take them on, right? Because we were in the early stages, we didn't have the pick of the litter. But over time, as we use different platforms and as we saw the different type of clients that were using each platform, so what we noticed on MailChimp, and no offense if anyone's on MailChimp, it was more like the mom and pop kind of smaller stores that were doing email very infrequently, right? A little bit more limited. And inherently, right, that type of client has a different mindset for growth than someone that's on a platform that's a little bit more expensive and more robust like Klaviyo. So for us, it was kind of the type of entrepreneurs that it, brought. And then from there, like its capabilities. At the end of the day, all of these tools are just tools and platforms, and it's really important that the person using them has the skills required. Although certain platforms like Klaviyo do make it easier to input and output things. So for us, Klaviyo just felt like it was the platform that had it was taking steroids, right? They had raised a lot of capital. They had really focused just on e-commerce, where MailChimp was more broad. And we just found a really liking to their system. Their team was great. Their support was great. We became a partner. So then all of our documentation, our training became, Klaviyo specific. That as we grew and as we scale as an agency, now we get to be a little bit more selective, and we only allow clients on Klaviyo because, we're biased with our own personal experience, but also too, with all the money that they keep raising, they're investing into being top of class.
Yeah, they want to be synonymous to Shopify email.
Yes.
That's what their mission statement, seems like, and they're relentless in making that happen. What about e-commerce platforms? Do you verge outside the Shopify ecosystem?
So we're not as particular about that. That being said, I'd say 90% of our book of business is Shopify. We do have some brands that we're working with in certain industries like cannabis and CBD that happen to be like on something like WordPress and WooCommerce, just because when they first started, Shopify was not compliant for it. From my understanding today, from everything I've seen, Shopify is now accepting of CBD in cannabis. So that's why. And then the only other thing I'll say, going back to Klaviyo, is they had a little bit more advanced, robust systems, specifically on the segmentation. You could extract a lot more in terms of segments that are smarter than something like a MailChimp. And then also too, like the ability to run A/B tests on flows. So it just felt like for us, like we happened to find Klaviyo at the right time. Whereas MailChimp was the other platform we were using predominantly. And they and Shopify announced like a breakup and a split, a little while back in 2019. So that also too, pushed us towards Klaviyo since we were predominantly using Shopify.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. I think we should jump into the meat of this conversation as we planned, and I really want us to get into a deep dive so people kind of understand how you work. Your obvious. It's obvious that your work ethic is right up there. Well, I want to get into the flesh of things, right? So tell me when you're ready.
Let's do it.
Okay,
I'm pumped.
let's do it. Let's do it. Okay, let's start out with revenue. Let's talk about revenue and email as a percentage of revenue. A lot of noise out there is focused on acquisition at the minute, and hardly, well, the conversations are starting to come on TLV, optimization, but and we know that the major channel for delivering lifetime value is email. So when do you what are the thresholds for a for a company that needs help in terms of percentage of revenue, and then for an okay company, and then for a best-in-class company?
Yeah. So I'd say on average, and our goal with a client is to get them to doing about 20% or more of their revenue coming from email. I'd say that's pretty typical on average. We do have some clients that have come in recently, right, that are at 5 or 10% of their revenue coming from email. And we have clients that are doing upwards of about 45 to 50% of their revenue coming from email. And there's a lot of factors that play in, right? One is how hard and how many levers are you pulling, right? If you're spending so much money on top of the funnel, right, like the percentage, might kind of weigh, because email is a little bit lagging what we've seen. So if you're spending a lot of money on top of the funnel, we'll see email attribution kind of lag by about a few weeks. And with other companies, right, that are kind of spending, modestly on Facebook, and email is a really important channel, email can account for a lot more revenue. So what we do see at minimum month over month is a dollar increase in terms of email revenue when we do work with clients. And the percentage increase is variable, again, depending on time of the year, depending on spend, and also depending on like what is the repeat purchase potential. Emails are really a great channel to drive repeat purchase. So things like supplements, things like skincare, things like hair care, right? With those types of clients, we do see email, being pretty solid, just because people have to replenish it. And we have automations in place that automatically remind people when they're running out, or when we think they're running out. So long-winded to kind of make the answer simple, 20% is kind of the revenue benchmark that we aim for with clients. But email can scale, as high as you could imagine.
It would depend on the business, really, essentially. What are you seeing in fashion and apparel?
So fashion and apparel, it depends on what people make. So for example, we were working with the parent company is called The Chive. They're like a men's millennial.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Klaviyo is a growth marketing platform that powers over 25,000 online businesses. Klaviyo understands every single customer interaction and empowers brands to create more personalized marketing moments. Listen, analyze, and act on your customer data with Klaviyo. Visit klaviyo.com/2x.
Kind of platform. They had an e-commerce business called The Chivery. They did about low 8 figures in revenue, and email would consistently account for, anywhere from about 25 to 35% of their revenue. The thing about them is they have so many different SKUs that you could kind of technically be buying something from them on a weekly, if not monthly basis. Or with other fashion things, right? If you're selling, let's say, a nice pair of denim jeans or something, you might only buy a pair on a quarterly basis or semi-annual basis, right? Again, it depends. If you're a female and you love the jeans, you might be buying it more, right? But with the Chive, for example, I could say that on average they're doing about 25 to 35% of their revenue from email.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, let's talk about email collection, and then we'll talk about flows and campaigns. So, I blab about the fact that you don't necessarily need to optimize for a purchase. Capture an email. Capture email. That's a micro conversion. It's a micro conversion. From your perspective, how important is capturing emails? Without necessarily a sales. I've had conversations with other e-commerce entrepreneurs who say the best way of capturing an email is through a sale. I beg to differ, but I would like to know your perspective in the importance of just a strategy for capturing emails.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of thoughts here. One, like everything that I do is so dependent on top of the funnel traffic and being able to take a visitor and turn them into an email. If I can't do that, I can't do my job, right? So I'm so dependent on collecting emails, whether it's, in terms of a pop-up or a flyout or embedded subscription, or someone entering their email at checkout, even if they've made it through the cart or not, or someone purchasing, right? Like that is crucial to my livelihood. And there's 3 different types of forms primarily. There's a pop-up, right, which we all know, it just pops up in the middle of the screen, right? It kind of takes it over. There's a flyout, which is a little bit less obtrusive. It literally kind of just flies out from the left or the right corner. It's a lot smaller. And then there's also what we call an embedded subscription form. Typically, brands will have that at the very bottom of their website. That's going to stay there. It's not going to move. Or they'll have it embedded within a blog post, right? So those are the 3 types of forms. And I actually had a call recently with the CEO of Privy. We were kind of talking about different types of incentives and offers and how those typically convert based off what he's seen. And he talked to me about the 3. So there's one that's just, hey, sign up for our email list to get the latest and the greatest, right? Pretty simple, not that exciting. He says that typically converts about 1% to 2%. So basically what that means is every 100 visitors will get 1 to 2 emails, right? So that's very low. He says an offer-based one, so 10% off, whatever, that will typically convert between 5 and 10%. So for every 100 visitors, you can expect between 5 to 10%, or 5 to 10 people to give you their email. And the last one is some kind of giveaway or sweepstakes. Enter your email to win, this giveaway, the sweepstakes, whatever it might be. And he's saying he sees that convert in the low teens. So where we typically live is in between those 2, the offer, right? If brands are willing and wanting to offer, or the giveaway, right, is the other alternative. So that's how we think about it.
Why are we so engineered to just like gamification as human beings? It's amusing that the sweepstake is the highest, as compared to the offer. It's amusing. So you mean the spinning pop-up, right?
So yes to that. Those actually convert really, really well. I know with the Chivery at one point we had like 12 or 14% on that. So that's one option. The other option is just something that says like, hey, Chase, enter your email to get a chance to win, our wallet of the week. Or enter your email to get a chance to win this package of the month, right? So either or.
Interesting. We had someone come in last year from, I think his name was Saksham, from a company called Outgrow. And what they do is they use like interactive marketing content to retrieve email. So they could use a quiz, polls, assessments, giveaways, as you alluded to, contest, and it could be embedded in various ways, whether it's a pop-up, in content, what have you. And we didn't really get into the nitty-gritty of conversions, as you just said, in terms of like typical rates to expect, but that was another outlet. The other question I had, which we're currently testing, is Facebook has a lead gen objective. Do you work with lead gen with emails collected from off of a website on Facebook? Are they effective in the long term? Is it a long-term strategy to just run a lead generation campaign for e-commerce so you could put them into a flow or life cycle marketing campaign of sorts?
Yeah, so I truthfully don't have as much experience with like the Facebook lead ad, whatnot. I do know we've had some clients in the past that had to learn the hard way, where they did not force people to manually enter their email, where Facebook would auto default their email address on profile, which typically would be like an EDU that you wouldn't even have access to, or an AOL or a Yahoo. So I know from that horror experience that a lot of companies, or not a lot, but a few that we worked with, have burned quite a bit of money. and the open rates of the emails and the bounces were really, really high just for the reasons I mentioned. So I do know, and again, I have a limited experience with this, that it is really important for these clients to make people, manually enter their email almost like they would like on a landing page or something, versus having it auto defaulted or auto filled. And we have done some stuff with that into like a welcome series or whatnot, but I truthfully don't have enough, expertise in that specific vertical to give anything interesting.
Okay, makes sense. All right, let's talk about flows versus campaigns. So what flows do you have as standard in with your clients? What are the must have flows, whether they're pre-purchase or post-purchase? How do you structure flows out if I also come to you fresh?
Awesome. Yeah, so to quickly kind of talk about those two, and then also there's a third, right? So the two that we focus the most on are campaigns and flows. And flows is basically synonymous with email automation. The third bucket and category, which we do work with, but we don't talk about it as much because it's not as sexy, is basically what's basically a transactional email, right? So these are things like shipping confirmation or order confirmation. So to quickly talk about each one, and then I'll answer the flow question. So a campaign is basically a one-time send to a group of contacts. So think about like a product launch or like a holiday offer, right? You'll hit someone that's on your list that's engaged over the last X number of days or X number of months, right? So that's us pushing to the client saying you should be interested in X, Y, and Z. Where the flow or the automation, right? That's someone that typically is on your list and they have to take some action or behavior that will trigger an email. Think abandoned cart or like a welcome series for non-buyer. And then the last category, the transactional email, that's like a shipping confirmation and order confirmation. Those typically by default are set up within Shopify. You do want to go in and kind of add some flair and some branding and whatnot to them because they're pretty cookie cutter and bare bones. That being said, I think it's more important to focus on the campaigns and flows first because that requires you to actually create them, where the automation on the transaction side is already set up. But sure, you can make those better, and you do want to make those better just because inherently they have such high opens. But to answer your question, so on the flow side, I'd say, again, there's a lot of flows. There's typically like, a dozen, 2 dozen flows that we'll build. But if I had to give you 3 kind of core flows that you have to do first in that bare minimum, I'm going to talk about each one individually, but at the high level, it's the abandoned checkout, which is different than the abandoned cart. It's the welcome series for non-buyers, and it's kind of some basic post-purchase. So let's talk about the welcome series for non-buyers. So that really is important in terms of all the pop-up and the email collection that we talked about. That's how someone will enter your list and they expect to receive content. So typically we'll send 4 emails for this welcome series. And at any point, if someone purchases in the welcome series, we will pause the next welcome series emails and instead push them into the post-purchase, right? We don't want to send them emails that are geared for people that have not purchased, et cetera. So the first email in the welcome series for non-buyers typically is a welcome, a thank you, here's a little bit more about us. And then it's delivering any of the value proposition that you promised upon entry. Here's 10% off, just to let you know you've been confirmed to enter this giveaway. Hey, here's this content piece, whatever it might be. That's email 1. Email 1 traditionally has the highest opens, the highest click-through, the highest placed order, and the highest revenue because most clients are using some kind of discount, right? So that's what people signed up for. That's what they expect, and they'll usually buy from that email. Email 2 typically is like, here are the benefits from shopping with us, right? Customers want to know what's in it for them. Here's what's in it for you. Here's how we're different from our competitors. Here's a little bit more about our origin story. Email 3 is all about social proof, right? We've been featured in this magazine. We've had 5,000 customers give us 5-star reviews. We're in 1,000 Nordstroms, and here are some of our popular products. And then the 4th email is basically, hey, you haven't purchased by now. That's totally fine. Why don't you learn more about our community? Join us on Facebook in our group, follow us on Instagram, shoot us any questions you have, etc. Right? So that's really kind of core and a really top producing flow and a top, engaging flow. And those are going to set up the relationship with your subscribers. So that's one. You have then the abandoned checkout, which again is different than the abandoned cart. So the abandoned checkout.
Yeah, a lot of people make that mistake, where they just think it's one and the same.
So many people. I mean, over the past couple of years, I have worked with probably over 100 e-commerce brands and have probably audited and looked inside 200 to 300 accounts. And that is probably the biggest missed opportunity that I see consistently. like that alone, depending on your size, like if you're a 7, 8, 9-figure store and you don't have that, you're easily conservatively leaving thousands of dollars a month on the table, right? Like we have some clients that are even doing 10, 25, $50,000 a month from the abandoned cart. Obviously these are 8 and 9-figure stores. But the abandoned checkout fires in one of two ways. Someone is already on your list and they start checkout and they don't purchase, or if someone makes it through part of the checkout where they enter their name, their phone number, their email, and they don't order, that will fire it. Where in all these other cases, the welcome series for non-buyers, the abandoned cart, the browse abandonment, these types of things require people to be on your list.
Could you explain to listeners the difference between an abandoned cart and an abandoned checkout flow?
So
when to use it and which should override, which is more important?
Absolutely. So I'm actually going to walk you through like the sequence, and there's 4 abandoned flows. Most people actually only know about 2 or 3. So if you think about the customer journey, right? Someone comes to your website, the most number of people, right, are at the top of the pyramid on your website, right? And as you go through each step, as there's friction involved, less and less people make it down to checkout and ultimately purchase. So at the top, you have people looking at your website. Then from there, if they're interested, they'll typically look at some kind of collection of product page, right? So they'll go for collection, and then they'll specifically look at individual products, right? And then from there, if they're further engaged, they'll actually add something to their cart. And if they're even further engaged, they'll then start checkout, and then they'll ultimately buy. So at each of those steps, you have a lot of drop off. So the one at the top that most people don't know about, and this one's really creepy, I'd be surprised if anyone's talked about in the show, is called a site abandonment. Has anyone talked about what's called a site abandonment email?
No, just a browse abandonment, not site abandonment. Yeah.
Cool. I always like sharing new things then. So the site abandonment is one above the browse abandonment. Then you have the browse abandonment, and then the abandoned cart and abandoned checkout. So essentially the site abandonment in Klaviyo it takes the trigger if someone is active on your website and then they don't meet these criteria. They've not viewed a specific product, they've not added to cart, they've not started checkout, and they've not purchased. So it's kind of creepy, but one really cool thing we did, so with the Chivery, again, I mentioned they sell a bunch of different types of t-shirts and apparels. They've got funny t-shirts, drinking t-shirts, fishing t-shirts, etc. Essentially what we've done throughout kind of COVID and quarantine is, hey, click on your favorite quarantine snack and we'll recommend you a shirt that you might like. So if someone clicks on, let's say the picture of their favorite snack is Lay's potato chips, we might send them, a drinking t-shirt. If someone clicks on, let's say Oreos, right, we might send them a drinking t-shirt, right? Like whatever it might be, we'll send them specific there. And just because it's so outrageous and out there, we're having a lot of opens and a lot of click-throughs, and we're having some place conversion. So I think we have about a 0.5% conversion on that email, but the open rates and the click-throughs are like 50% open rates and like 8 or 10% click-throughs. And the importance of that email is pushing people to the next bucket, right? So if we can get people to click on something and view a product, and we can get them to add to cart, then our abandoned cart and other things are going to kick in, right? We can move people along the funnel. That's really what these abandoned flows are built for, is moving people 1 or 2 or 3 steps further down the funnel. Yeah. So if someone's active on your site and viewed a product, instead of sending the site abandonment, you're going to hold and pause that. You're going to send the browse abandonment, right? And that's if people have not added to cart and not started checkout, right? So you're going to send the browse abandonment. Hey, saw that you're looking at these products. They're selling out fast. We've got limited quantity. Oh, by the way, here's 10% off, like whatever it might be. It's showing people dynamically the product or the products that they viewed and trying to push people again further down the funnel. And then in the abandoned cart, if people have added to their cart, which is the trigger, and they have not started checkout and have not purchased, and if they've done those other 2, again, pause those and send the abandoned cart. You want to prioritize the one that's furthest down the funnel. So that way you can communicate to people with where they're actually at. And then the abandoned checkout is for people that have added to their cart, started checkout, but not purchased, right? So there's these little nuances, and they all are based off the trigger or the action that people take. So you want to have flow filters on each one, which is pretty simple to do. I know it's kind of sounds confusing, but have flow filters in place so that way people don't receive the site abandonment, the browse, the abandoned cart, and the abandoned checkout in one go. That would basically be 4 emails from you, which would be a terrible experience.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how do you distinguish or dedupe welcome series from like site abandonment? Which has more priority?
Yeah, so typically we will wait for people to go through the welcome series and whatnot before they could receive the site abandonment. That's typically how we think about it. And most people aren't going to do the site abandonment probably for a while. So having that filter in place that people have completed the welcome series is really important. And it's as simple as basically tagging a property profile in someone's account that just says, Chase has completed the welcome series. And then you can run a segment
feed them into it.
filter.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
So it's like a pipe between flows. Okay, makes sense.
Exactly. And reasons that people would, receive a site abandonment is maybe they saw a retargeting ad or something, came back to your homepage, but didn't do anything else. Or maybe you even sent them to like a blog page, right? The goal wasn't to send them to a product page, but maybe you sent them to like a blog piece of content. They read the blog piece of content. Then you want to follow up with them after they've read some content with some product, right? Those types of things. Like that's kind of traditionally what we see.
Speaking of blogs, do you have any clients that have really high traffic blogs? And what are they doing with it from an email collection point? Is it sort of looping back to the more transactional areas of their website?
So there's two that come to mind. One is the Chive, right? Again, like but the interesting thing about them is the Chive is a separate property than the Chivery. So they almost have like the blog or like a media property, and then they've kind of have commerce, in between. So in their daily newsletter for the Chive, they have an insert at the very bottom of like a plug to the Chivery. So that's how they go about it, right? They produce content on the Chive, and then they funnel people through emails at the very bottom of like the product of the day or the product of the month or the product of the week to the Chivery. That's one example of two different sites. The other site that comes to mind is we worked with a company called Home Life Media. They own iHeartDogs.com, iHeartCats.com. They own a bunch of really cool properties in the pet space.
They're like big Facebook pages, aren't they? I Heart Cats and huge. Yeah,
that's how they
just
started.
Rings a bell. Yeah. Okay.
It started on Facebook pages and with Facebook groups. I don't know the specific number, but they probably have millions, if not tens of millions.
Yeah, because they're an interest in Facebook.
Yes.
They're a target interest in Facebook. When you
and they own a bunch of different things. Without giving too much away, they have like a CBD business. They have senior dogs. They've got like all these properties and these groups and these Facebook pages and these Instagram accounts, right? So for them, they're one site that is part content and media and blog, and then part commerce. And majority of their revenue does come from commerce, so it's something that they do heavily push. But they'll have like pop-ups for like content and whatnot. Enter your email to see 10 cool pictures of cats or 10 cool pictures of dogs. So they kind of have a really nice mix where like the emails rotate between specifically education content.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Did you know that cloud-hosted e-commerce platforms like Shopify and BigCommerce do not provide automatic backups? Rewind steps in to protect Shopify and BigCommerce stores with automatic backups. Rewind is trusted by over 25,000 stores. Install Rewind and get to test it for free over 7 days. And to extend the 7-day trial to 30 days, head over to rewind.io, their website, and mention 2x e-commerce.
And then kind of specifically selling and then hybrids. So those were kind of just two.
Does that route into like a Klaviyo flow when they capture an email in their blog?
Correct. Yeah, correct. They have like an education flow or like a welcome series or a nurture. They actually send daily campaigns, which is pretty crazy. Most brands don't, but because they have so much
scary.
Content, yeah, it's scary. But so going back to the revenue percentage as well, the revenue that you drive from email also is dependent on how frequently you send, how big your list is. And that also determines the weight between revenue being produced from campaigns as well as revenue being produced for flows. So in the case of like the Chivery and iHeartDogs, they have such big lists. They have 1 million+ people lists, and they send very frequently. I don't remember the Chivery's exact cadence. I think they're sending daily or every other day. So the weight of their campaign revenue is a lot bigger than their flows, just because they're pushing to so many more people every single day and whatnot. But the iHeartDogs, I won't give away their specific numbers, but they're doing 40-50% sometimes of their revenue from email, and it's sizable. It's very sizable.
Super interesting. Super interesting. Okay, so we talked about we talked about the flows. You were at the Abandoned Cart
and checkout. Yeah,
and checkout. Yeah.
So I think we're probably mostly good there. Just to round that out and talk about the last flow I wanted to talk about was, again, like you want to dynamically show people the product or products they've left behind, leverage any kind of social proof, whether it's in the form of testimonials, reviews, press mentions, etc. And you want to introduce some kind of, scarcity if you're leveraging offers, discount expires in 24 hours. And you could even have a countdown timer in the email that basically as soon as someone opens it, they'll see the timer counting down from 24 hours. So those are kind of the abandons, right? So the welcome series for non-buyers, that's pre-purchase.
Question. I've come across brands that are very hesitant in giving an offer in the abandoned carts and abandoned checkouts, because they think they're training people to abandon their carts and checkouts. Would you agree with that opinion, or what do you would you just ascribe to always having that incentive towards getting that sale?
I live somewhere in the middle. I think customers, unfortunately, are already trained to check those emails. It may differ based on brand, right? So someone might abandon your checkout and then realize you don't have a discount and then maybe buy without a discount, or maybe they might not buy, right? Maybe they might go to your competitor that has a similar product and then has a discount and it's a little bit cheaper. So it really depends on like the brand affinity, right? We work with some brands that have such cult-like followings, like irrespective of a discount, people are going to buy over you 10 out of 10 times than your competitors. One example, again, I don't necessarily know who their competitor is. We work with a really fun brand called Nugs, and it's not marijuana. It's the chicken nugget alternative. It's Eat Nugs. Have you seen that brand?
Yeah, Nugs. I've heard of it. I'm in the UK, but it's so popular that I've heard of it several times on Twitter in the D2C e-commerce space. Yeah.
And we do a really great job with them. We can't take the credit. They have such a great cult following. They've got such great assets and content.
Why? How? Could you explain the whole Nugs thing to me? No one's explained it to me. Is it taste? What is it? Why are they so popular?
Again, one, I think branding. I think they've done a really great job with the branding and positioning. I think that's so important. Two, they've got really key like influencers and people that have invested and also rep the product. I don't know, I'm blanking on his name, but I think he's like Arnold Schwarzenegger's like son or nephew or something that's invested in it. He's on Twitter. They've had some of like the Hadids. I don't know if they've invested in it, but they've posted it. And they do a lot of drops that are very scarce. Like, for example, they did this craziest thing, and I might butcher it, but they relaunched this spicy nugs. And the way that they did it was you had to follow them on Instagram, turn on push notifications, and then they did some crazy thing with OnlyFans, like where you had to sign up on OnlyFans or something for free to be notified.
Their OnlyFans.
Yeah, they're OnlyFans. So like they just did crazy stuff like that. Like they dropped 1,000 of them. They let the people that they have a monthly subscription. They let the people that are subscribers to the monthly subscription get access first. They only did 1,000. And then there's hilarious stuff. I don't know whether it's true or not, but like people are selling spicy nugs on eBay for like $100 a box. So they've really built this story and this following. And if you look at how they engage on social, they really don't give a shit. Like they'll call people out. They'll make fun of people. They're authentic, right? When you're authentic, you really push people in one of two directions, right? They either love you or they hate you. A lot of us, right, are indifferent to brands, with the exception, right? Like Nike, I love, right? A lot of people love Nike. And obviously they're a very rare case. And other brands, it's like, I don't care if I'm buying this t-shirt or that t-shirt, like whoever has the best deal and whatever ad I see, I'm going to buy. So I think the brands that can make you feel a certain type of way and can do certain things. And again, it's a psychological thing.
It's feelings, man. It's feelings, all about feelings.
Exactly. By the way, we went on this rampage. I don't remember what the question was. I'm so excited and so passionate about this.
The question, if I can remember, was around I've freaking forgotten now.
I got too excited.
Exactly. It was we were talking about abandoned checkouts.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And offers and
we're talking about offers and abandoned checkouts. Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So again, like it depends on the brand. Like if you're a brand that people know as a discount brand, and I don't mean that meanly, right? If you're giving discounts off in your welcome series, if you're giving discount off in your campaigns, you should be consistent and give it to people when they abandon checkout, right? However, we do work out with other brands that A, have never given a discount, or B, have kind of seldomly given a discount, right? The only time they discount is like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, because they have to. With those brands, like you have to very focus on like the value propositions and the benefits and the social proof and those types of things, right? Like the intangibles. Or if you're a brand that's kind of somewhere in the middle, and say you have a 3-part abandoned cart or 3-part abandoned checkout, the first 2 emails can be trying to win people to buy the sale without any offer. And then the third email, if they have not converted, basically could be some kind of offer, right? So you can test the waters with no discount, no discount. Oh, here's 10% off, or
Yeah.
no discount, 10% off. Oh, by the way, third email, you haven't bought, we're actually increasing your discount from 10 to 15%. And we've been testing that with a couple of clients, and it's really interesting to see, how, it does or does not move the needle. In the few cases we've done it, it actually has moved the needle because we've been so straightforward in the subject line is like, hey, we've increased your discount. Like people are just like, wait, what? And it has increased conversion, right? But the other flip side that we're still trying to run the numbers is the increase in conversion, is that still producing more revenue than the extra, incremental discount, right? So say, for example, someone spends $1,000 at 10% off, someone spending, more than $1,000 at 15% off to kind of make up for it. And that's kind of where the jury's still out.
I need this the follow-up question I was about to ask you, which I'm going to ask you now, is two things. Repeat customers, would you treat them the same way in an abandoned, checkout or abandoned cart flow? And two, monetary value. Do you run any split test on, because this guy's about to spend, I don't know, $2,000 and your AOV is 500, let's give her or him a different kind of discount. So do you sort of, there are many ways to sort of flesh this, to flesh this out, but where would you sort of say is optimal from both perspectives, repeat customers and monetary value?
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts. So a couple of things that we've been testing, and within Klaviyo, basically all you have to do is you have to run basically a random sample on the traffic, so you can split it 50-50 to be able to A/B test some of these things. So for example, like we work with a lot of clients that sell, in the US as well as kind of internationally. So we might do like a split. In that case, it would obviously be off location instead of like a random split. But in the case of like location, we might do, if they're here in the US, we serve them one piece of content that offers them free shipping on top of whatever it is, or maybe it just offers them free shipping. Where on the international side, we don't ever mention free shipping or anything like that. So that's kind of been an interesting split based off of like geography. Another split that we're kind of starting to talk about and test is AOV. Less about like the extreme of the order and more trying to get people to kind of bump their AOV up. So for example, say we have a free shipping offer at $50. We might have the $50 be the split where people that are under an AOV of $50, we send them an email saying like, hey, you're so close to free shipping, add an extra item or two to your cart on it. Where people over it, they might receive no discount or they might receive something separate. So the offers might be split based off of AOV in the case of trying to bump people. It's like an AOV bump. That's one thing. And then other times, like we will just treat people, the same depending on like what the product is or isn't. So it's really like a case by case basis in terms of how we split it.
And how's Klaviyo with reporting on the test? So you run a test and personally the intention of the test. So you talked about the AOV one, which is like, hit the threshold. You just spent $50. The threshold is $70. Spend an extra 20. Here are a few things you could, throw into your cart so that 20 and they're relevant to you. When you go into Klaviyo for reports, how do you sort of check the validity? How do you sort of get Klaviyo to give you the average order value across the board in that particular flow over a period of time? Is it easy? I'm not too sure about. I don't know much about that area. Is it easy to sort of look at the results and say, okay, this actually works, so we're going to keep this flow?
Yeah, so like for example, the easy way to look at it like holistically at a kind of a high level is if you go into the specific flow and you turn on analytics, you can see the specific open rates, click through, place order percentage, and the dollar revenue over like a period of time, 30 days or 90 days, whatever it is, on the email, right? So for some things like, hey, 10% versus 15% off, like you could see like the conversion rate and some of those things. However, I think if you click into the individual email, you should be able to see the AOV for that email. I don't know necessarily if you could see that in the reporting, but I think you could see it on the email itself within the flow. So for example, like on a campaign, I know for sure, like we could see, oh, there's this many orders for an AOV of $45, right? Okay. So you can see some of those things. But again, some of the stuff is a little bit more manual. You kind of have to go check in. Sure. I don't know about more like any automated reporting type way to kind of like see that and whatnot kind of granularly.
Okay. Okay. Makes sense. Makes sense. Okay. So besides those other flows, are there any other flows, maybe post-purchase flows you think everybody must have?
Yeah, so kind of just to round this out, I know we've been talking about flows for a long time, so we can move on after
Mm,
this. I apologize, but
no
on
worries.
the post-purchase, right? I think the bare minimum, you need to have a customer thank you, and we typically will split it based off first-time purchase versus repeat purchase. It's so
Mhm,
important to thank customers for their order. You know, we'll
mhm,
reduce buyer's remorse. It's going to set up the ability to hopefully get a customer review that's positive, et
mhm,
cetera, right? To thank them from the
mhm,
order. If your product is one that needs education or kind of knowledge, whether that might be like, let's say, CBD or a supplement or
mhm,
hair care, skincare, like you want to teach people how to use it. And by teaching people how to use it, they get the maximum value from it, which hopefully then turns into a repeat purchase. So by
mhm,
me telling you, let's say for CBD or hair care, skincare, this is how frequently you should consume it. This is how frequently you should apply it. I want you
mhm,
basically to use it in 30 days, right? Because I want to be able to get a purchase from you every single month. Hey, take this
mhm,
multivitamin once a day in the morning, right? Like people do that and tell you that, A, so that way you remember, but B, so that way they can keep selling you more, and C, so hopefully it works, right? It's really important to be consistent. So we'll have some kind of like education around the product. Another example that comes to mind is we worked with a brand out of Australia that sells weighted blankets. It's called calming blankets. And essentially
mhm,
what happened there is we noticed a lot of people are reaching out with customer support tickets and complaints saying, hey, I don't really know how to use this. How does this work? So we took all those
mhm,
support tickets and we're like, what are the frequently asked questions or what are the frequently asked answers? So we applied that in an email. Hey, while you wait for your item, here are 3 ways our customers have found success using it. Use it, like you're getting a hug from someone. Use it, as a blanket. Use it to kind of like ground you, like whatever it might have been. I can't remember the exact 3 things. We would give people like 3 ways and kind of some explanation of how people used it, and we saw that decreased the number of support tickets that we were getting, and decreased the number of basically returns because people actually knew how to use it and they're able to
mhm,
benefit from it.
mhm,
So those types of emails, and then any kind of like cross-selling, upsell emails are important post-purchase. So those are kind
mhm.
of like the main things. I know that was a lot that we would focus on. And then
Yeah,
outside of that, right, like I guess I already talked about like the abandoned flows. There's like customer win
yeah,
backs. There's breakup series. The
yeah.
cross sells, upsells. You could do flows specifically based off what someone ordered, what someone didn't order, etc. So there's a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna outline everything you just said,
Cool,
in the show notes. So it's
awesome.
really succinct for people to read through when after they listen to this. Okay, what about campaigns? We talked about flows, which was hugely insightful. Thank you, Chase. But what about campaigns? You talked about one of your clients who send emails every day. Obviously, they have a large enough database and they have a
Yes.
large enough catalog to do that. But um for D2Cs that have a limited SKU count, are very limited to what they sell. They could just be selling candles, for instance.
Yeah.
When is it too much and when is it too little?
Yeah, so I'll talk about how we gauge frequency, then I'll talk about buckets of campaigns.
Mhm,
So the frequency thing is start with 1 campaign a week and monitor your metrics. What do the open rates look like? What do the click-through rates look like? What do the marked as spam look like? What does the bounce look like? What does the unsubscribe look like? Right? What's the conversion? So look at the positive engagements, which are things like open, yeah,
sorry, from
click-through.
a yeah, yeah, open click through. Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, sorry. So basically send 1 campaign per week and look at the positive engagements, the open rates, the click-throughs, the conversion, the revenue, et cetera. Also monitor the negative engagements, the mark to spam, the bounce, the unsubscribe. Also look at customer support tickets. Is anyone complaining that you sent too many emails per week, right?
Mhm,
That's one way we look at it. If those metrics all look good, the benchmark typically for open rates is trying to get a 20% open rate or higher. The click-through is going to vary, greatly depending on what the goal of the campaign is and whatnot. But if you got a 20% open rate or higher on it, and there was low unsubscribes, all those things, send a second email per week, right? Email 2 looks just as good. Maybe it looks better. Maybe it looks a little bit worse, but it's about the same, right? Send a third email per week. If the third email per week is where you see friction happen, if you see the open rates decrease, if you see the click-throughs decrease, if you see the mark to spam, the bounces, the unsubscribes increase, if you see the customer support tickets say, hey, I never signed up for your list to get 3 emails a week, what's happening? Then the optimal emails per week is 2, right? You really want to
mhm,
focus on maximizing revenue by sending enough, but minimizing churn by not sending too frequently. So that's how I
mhm,
think about the number of emails per week. I would say most 7, 8, 9-figure brands that we work with send on average about 3 to 5 times per week. And we're hitting different segments. And then again, I promise I'll talk about campaigns. So the segments that we'll hit.
Yeah, the segments, exactly. Because I was going to ask you about, like, who do you hit? Do you send the emails to all? Do you send it to engaged? Who do you send the campaigns to? The segments, I'm kind of like aware of. There's like a VIP customer list. There's the engaged subscribers. There's even engaged customers. You have like inactive, people, and then you have low spenders potentially. So what's the criteria for sending emails if you're going to send it every week or more than once a week?
Yeah, so you just named some great ones. So the engaged segment, and by the way, segmentation is the name of the game of email. You do not have longevity of your email channel if you don't segment.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. Klaviyo is a growth marketing platform that powers over 25,000 online businesses. Klaviyo understands every single customer interaction and empowers brands to create more personalized marketing moments. Listen, analyze, and act on your customer data with Klaviyo. Visit klaviyo.com/2x.
Your list. If you batch and blast everyone on your list, you might not be in trouble today, but in a few weeks, in a few months, I guarantee that you'll be in trouble by batching and blasting everyone. It is so important. I think that's the biggest change and also the hardest thing to get across to people. When I first started an email like 5 or 6 years ago, you could kind of just batch and blast your list and you used to be fine, right? There was not a ton of repercussions unless you were selling, certain things that you probably shouldn't be selling and you're kind of scamming about it. But that's been the biggest shift and the biggest change. And the reason that people shoot themselves in the foot is they have not been able to grasp the concept of segmentation. And I understand why. Inherently, let's keep the number really, really small. Say you have 1,000 people on your list. Inherently, people think by sending to all 1,000 people on your list, irrespective of engagement, that you're going to get the most opens, that you're going to get the most clicks, you're going to get the most sales. However, it is this weird concept of segmentation, of hitting the 800 people on your list, or whatever the number is that are engaged and placed orders and certain things. Those 800 people are actually going to end up with just as many opens, if not more opens. Obviously, the percentage is going to be higher, the click-through is going to be higher, and the placed orders is going to be just as good, if not better. And people cannot wrap their heads around, like, well, what about those 200 people that I paid to acquire? It's like, what value have they done for you other than making you pay more money to Klaviyo, right? None. So leveraging segmentation is important. And again, you have to pick the segment that will allow you to straddle that line of getting a 20% open rate. That could be a 30-day engage for some people, basically, which means people have opened or clicked over the last 30. That could be all the way up to a 120-day engage, right? And in between, right? 60, 90, 120, potentially a 150, right? So that's how I think about picking the segment for engage. And then building off the engaged segment, you want to do like the engaged VIPs. You want to do the segment of people that have purchased. Some other interesting things is gender. So in Klaviyo, they have what's called predictive analytics. So they could tell you the likelihood that someone's male, the likelihood that someone's female, or that they're unsure. So sending content to men in a specific way and women in a specific way, and obviously having it at default where if, Klaviyo got it wrong. So essentially all you have to do, if you're sending to men first, organize the men's products up top, organize the women's products in the second category. For women's up top, men's second. So you do have a fallback. You don't want to like trust Klaviyo 100% and look like an idiot, right? And really be wrong. But like taking that.
Should we talk about profile enrichment real quickly, please? Now that you mentioned male and female.
Yeah. So, and the last segment we'll talk about
after that,
is one that stands out is geography. So I talked a little about geography in terms of like free shipping, but I'm based here in California where the weather is always sunny and warm, right? Whereas on the East Coast of the United States, like in New York, right now it could be snowy and rainy, right?
Yeah.
So on the West Coast, right, like people could still send me an email if they sell apparel of flip-flop shorts and t-shirts, and I'm going to buy it. Where on the East Coast, you're going to want to send those people beanies and hoodies and sweatpants, right? So I think a lot of people could do a lot better job on segmenting based off geo. I haven't seen it enough. So testing with some of these segments. And then you asked about profile enrichment. Is there a certain way to go with it?
So like in fashion, exactly. Like you could have like a big fashion store that has, male, female, and children. And you don't want to send the same as you just said, as you just alluded to, you stack up based on, predictive analytics. But how can you sort of would you put it in the pop-up and just say, identify yourself, whether you're male, female? Many fashion e-commerce businesses do it. Or would you put a staged flow in the welcome series or something, or in the post-purchase, series to identify themselves? Or would you look at the products they've purchased in the past to, figure out, what they are likely to be? I guess that's how Klaviyo's predictive analytics may work. What would you suggest in terms of getting more data around a particular customer profile?
Cool. I'm going to dive into all those. So finishing on the predictive analytics based on what you said, I think Klaviyo is looking at product purchase, but also they're looking at basically people's names. And if a name based off of some database is 100% male, they're going to say someone's 100% male or likely male, or someone's female, right? So for example, the name Taylor, how would you know? Like Taylor could be a man or a female, right?
Yeah.
But in most cases, like Mike is a male, right? I don't really know any women named Mike. And right, and some name I don't know, Chloe probably is going to be most female. Of the time a girl, right? Again, I think that's how they look at it. Is they look at like census data and see based off of the likelihood and whatnot.
Makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And then going to the profile enrichment, all the things you said have validity, and those are all things that we do, right? So essentially, what category of collection someone purchased from? They purchased from this male collection, this female collection. You could have what's called a radio button. That's exactly what you mentioned in the pop-up, that you have the ability to choose male or female. That's another thing. But the other, looking at what they've even browsed, the other really cool thing that we've done, I haven't seen a lot of people do this, is Klaviyo has the ability to automatically update custom properties based off what someone has clicked. So for example, if you think about an email and someone has a header, men's, women's, children, and sale, right? So if you click on men, I can automatically tag your property that says, Chase clicked on male in the campaign header, or Chase clicked on, kids, because I have a daughter, right, in the flow header category, right? That's one way. Another way, so going back to the Chivery that I mentioned we worked with in the past, we would, in the welcome series flow, we would feature their 9 top categories and collections, and we would tag each of those. So Chase clicked drinking t-shirts in welcome series email 1. So then we know that Chase might be interested in drinking t-shirts, right? So there are different ways based off what people are telling us to their purchase, based off what people are clicking without them actually even knowing. Like we don't tell people these links are tracked, but this is something that we see and kind of parse out on the back end. So there's a lot of really cool things you could do to enrich the data, which really is the name of the game for 2021, right? Is how do you become smarter and who you're communicating with?
Makes a lot of sense. You're judging people by what they do, not necessarily what they say. They click, men, 7 times. You're sure with statistical significance that 7 out of 7 times they clicked on that, so they must be interested, in the male category. So
exactly. And to round out the campaign, I promised this a while ago, but the campaign buckets that we send. So there's a couple kind of overarching ones. So one obviously is like product or collection launches, right? People want to know about the latest and the greatest. Product launches are a great way to get people excited. Yeah. Great way to get first-time buyers to purchase. Great way to get repeat purchases, and whatnot. That's one. 2 is sales emails, right? Obviously, everyone knows sales emails, whether it's a flash sale or a holiday sale or even just a holiday email. That's another. Education is another one, right? Whether it's, hey, check out this blog post or watch this video, right? You link out to a video, or even you just educate people. Hey, we're a certified B Corporation. We really care about the environment. Or hey, we're Tom's Shoes. For every pair purchase, we donate 1. This is how the model works. This is what we've done with it, right? Other categories could be things like National Today is, right? National Today is Dog Day, right? That could be a way to educate people, but also sell products for your dog store, right? There's like all these different types of emails, social proof emails, right? Here are all the reviews we've received, et cetera. This item is back in stock. Like there's a lot of different buckets of campaigns that you can send. Here's our winter emails. Here's our summer emails, right? There's so many cool things. Here's what this influencer said about our product, and you can show all the collection of items that person's worn. So there's some featuring people in the community. Like I could go on and on. There's so many different buckets of categories. So when people have the excuse of like, oh, I don't know what to send, it's like there are so many things to send. Like just press send and see what people like and see how it resonates, and then figure out the cadence, figure out all these things. So it takes work, but as you figure out what people on your list like, it becomes repeatable.
Yeah, from what you're saying, if you look at it on two angles, I'm just looking at it from a 30,000 viewpoints here. You find a a threshold in terms of like the number of times you could send weekly to particular segments,
Yes.
which should be planned out. On the other side, you need to really be feeding the engine with with emails consistently. So
Yes.
do you grow, should like email list growth be a metric? How we say, what kind of numbers are you doing? What's your gross, on a monthly basis or an annual basis? Should brands be really checking the growth of their email on a month-to-month basis? And should alarm bells be set if that velocity isn't maintained or isn't increased over time?
Yeah, so the way that we view ourselves as a performance agency, whether it's on the side that Nick does with paid social, which obviously is, as performance as it gets. And then us on the email side, like, sure, we make great looking emails, we write really great copy, but at the end of the day, like we are designing and building emails for conversion. So the way that we live and die with clients is based off of, where were you when we started with you? Where have we gone over the first 3 months? Where have we gone over the first 6 months? Where have we gone over the first year? And the goal, right, is to hopefully see some sort of hockey stick growth over the start of working with us through the first year, right? Obviously, right, these are not things that happen overnight. Like it does take time, but you should be seeing the trend in the upward direction of making sure that emails attributable revenue is increasing, the dollar from emails increasing. So yeah, I mean, we do weekly and monthly reporting with clients. We do weekly calls with clients. We are talking about how campaigns this week stacked up to last week, how campaigns this week stacked up to last month, how campaigns stacked up to last year, right? And really making sure that we are moving the needle.
And I think that metric, that email number of emails acquired, is a very important metric, because it sort of it oils the machine more or less. If emails stop, if you stop collecting emails, then it sort of stops it limits you in a way.
Yeah,
Okay.
new email acquisition is huge. And then the other metric that we focus on is what's called RPR, which is revenue per recipient. How much revenue are we driving per each user? And that number varies so greatly depending, again, on like the size of the list, the AOV, the repeat purchase. Like it really depends, like number of emails sent per week, or like, so revenue per recipient is also somewhere looking at, like, how much is an email worth to us? And I mentioned this before, but I was talking to the Privy CEO recently, and he mentioned, based off the data they have, in 2019, I think he said an email on their merchants were worth like $14 or $16. And then in 2020, it was actually worth like $33. So their merchants actually made more money from less emails, or more money from more emails as well, in 2020. And that could be the fact that more people were home, like, looking at emails. Maybe people weren't spending as much on Facebook. Like, I don't know exactly. We didn't necessarily like make any assumptions on the specific reasons, but the revenue per recipient, the value of an email has been increasing.
Super interesting, Chase. I'm going to have to be respectful of your time, but before I let you go, is there anything we haven't covered as yet?
So we talked about campaigns. We talked about flows at length. We talked about segmentation. I mean, we talked about email collection. Like, those, in my opinion, are really kind of the core pieces of email. I guess the last thing would be, and I don't want to touch on it too much because we spent a little bit of time there, but not a ton of time there, is just making sure that your transactional emails look on brand. If that's even just swapping out the logo, maybe some background color, some fonts, just make those look presentable. And one advice for people that are on Shopify Plus, there are certain emails that you can pause in Shopify Plus on the Shopify site itself that you could build into Klaviyo. That is not something you could do with a regular Shopify store. So like an order confirmation or certain emails, we've moved over to Klaviyo because we have more control over what that email actually looks like. And we can actually see the people going into that and whatnot, and optimize a little bit better. And that's been a really great way to push more product and drive a lot of engagement. So Shopify Plus, people pause certain emails in Shopify after you build them in Klaviyo.
That's a hack. Thank you so much, Chase. Thank you. So I'll wrap up by asking you what we should expect ahead. What you were expecting from 2021 to 2025 from an email innovation standpoint? Would email continue being the predominant channel for, lifetime value maximization? What kind of trends, what kind of trends are we to expect? Should e-commerce managers or e-commerce directors or founders listening to this episode, expect, moving forward?
Yeah, I think again, I'm obviously bullish and also biased, but I think the importance of email in 2021 and beyond is so important. So Nick and I filmed some content over this past weekend about like iOS 14 and everything happening there. I mean, we feel really good as an agency, the fact that we have both top of the funnel and bottom of the funnel, middle of the funnel, right? For that reason. So I think the importance of a brand and the importance of agencies that offer services, having some kind of retention arm is going to be crucial. I think, what I talked about in terms of like enriching data, what we talked about around enriching data around gender, what people are buying, what people are reviewing, where people are located, like the more specific we can get via email, because I think we're going to be able to be less specific on top of the funnel around tracking certain these things, the better. And we could serve some of that data from Klaviyo into Facebook and other things about our own users around retargeting and certain lookalikes and whatnot to be really intelligent. And then I'm actually surprised we have not seen much of it or really any of it, but I think AMP is probably one of the most underrated things.
Yeah, true.
It's something that is
accelerated mobile pages.
Yes. Yeah. And essentially what it does is allows emails to be more interactive. So if you think about the things that you could do on a landing page, being able to do a product carousel, right? So say there's a product that has 5 images, being able to click between products and see them. That's something you can do with an email. They have the ability, so just like you're on a website, say there was an FAQ section and everything was hidden. If you click on the plus button, it opens up a section at a time. I believe it's called like an accordion. You can actually do that within an email itself. So there are a lot of really cool things that you could do within email through AMP. There are certain barriers around you. You need to be technical. You have to have certain sending infrastructure, et cetera. I think that's really cool. I also have been seeing like some one kind of click checkouts, one click to buy within an email, which I think is really cool. I haven't seen a lot of brands doing that yet. So I think like with new payment providers, whether it's like Apple Pay or Shopify Pay and new technology, people are going to be able to buy within an email instantly and directly. So those are some of the things I'm looking forward to and excited about.
Yeah, transactions are coming to email for sure. Even if it's not, even if it starts out with the one click, as you alluded to, eventually, it's exciting. It's just exciting, I have to say. Chase, it's been no one's been this open in a very long time. So I appreciate everything. I appreciate this time and all of the knowledge you've been able to share with us for free. For those people who love, anyone listening now would want to follow you or is currently following you, where's the best platform to follow your work? Where you're on chasedemon.com, I believe. But are you active on social media? Where would you like people to follow you and engage with you?
Yeah, I'm obsessed with Twitter. Like Twitter is my platform. I drop everything there first. So you might need to mute me on Twitter after a while because I post a lot, but the content's really, really good. So follow me on we'll appreciate that. Ecom Chase Diamond. So ECOM and then Chase Diamond, no A in the diamond. So if you could link that in the show notes, that'd be awesome.
I will.
Thank you.
I will. Appreciate it again. Have a good one, buddy. Thank you so much.
You too. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
All right. Cheers. Okay. Yep. All